Hello everyone, I'm Thais and today I'm here to do my May wrap-up. I read a total of 12 books this month. I could have read more, but towards the end of the month I was feeling a bit nostalgic and I downloaded all episodes in the Inuyasha anime and I've been watching it non-stop ever since. So that took away some of my reading time, but it didn't really mess up my reading schedule. I'm still nearly 20 books ahead of my Goodreads reading challenge, so that's okay. The first book I read this month was Lover Avenged by J.R. Ward. This is the 7th book in the Black Dagger Brotherhood series, which is an adult series that follows vampires. Each book has a different protagonist, but there is also a bigger background story that's on all the books. And even though this book follows Revenge, who is one of my least favorite characters, it didn't disappoint me. I liked how that bigger background story that I talked about is really present and somewhat connected to everything that happens to Revenge and his love interest. Even though this book is really massive, it didn't get boring at all. It is filled with action scenes, even though there's a lot of romance too, and I ended up giving this 5 out of 5 stars. Next, I read my very first comic book, and that was Loki by Robert Roddy and Esad Ribic. As the title suggests, this book tells the story from the point of view of the character Loki. Even though I really wanted to enjoy this book, I didn't. I expected this to show a bit more of Loki's background story and maybe explain his character a bit more, but it was actually really shallow. I think that Loki is one of the most complex characters in the Marvel Universe, and I didn't get to see that in this book. The ending was also I just hated it, it wasn't for me. So the only thing that kind of saved this book was the artwork. I'm going to show you one of the pages, but it is really well done and has a lot of details. So that was really nice, and because of that I ended up giving this 3 out of 5 stars. Next I read The Darkest Part of the Forest by Holly Black. This book takes place in a town where humans and fairies coexist, and in the middle of the forest there's a glass coffin where a hornet boy has been asleep for centuries until one day he awakens and brings danger with him. This was one of my favorite books of the month. It was my first experience with a full-length novel by Holly Black, and I loved it. The characters are so unique and captivating, and the story is just magical. It was kind of impossible for me to stop reading. I just wanted to know what would happen next and how and why things were happening. I started reading this book a day before I had an exam and I needed to study. Needless to say, I didn't get any studying done until I finished this. This is a book that I really recommend if you want to read a different fairy story. I ended up giving it 4.5 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was The Conspiracy of Us by Maggie Hall. This book follows a girl named Avery who finds out that her family, that she didn't even know existed in the first place, is part of a very dangerous secret society, and that she is somehow involved in an ancient prophecy. I highly enjoyed this book. It is action-packed, but there's also this gossip girlish side to the reality that Avery finds herself thrown into, and I really enjoyed that. The characters also find themselves having to follow some clues, and I thought that was really interesting. Even though it didn't get a lot of focus on this book, it felt like the sequel might have some more of that, so I'm really looking forward to it. The only thing that bothered me a little bit about this book was right at the beginning, the main character makes a decision that to me it sounded really unrealistic, and the reasons that the author found to explain why she made the decision just didn't work for me. But other than that, it was a really great read and I'm looking forward to reading the next book. I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. There's no way to describe this book other than magical. The writing is whimsical and beautiful, and the way the book is structured is just unlike anything I've ever seen. If you want to read this book, I highly recommend you go into it without knowing anything about it. I'm really glad that I did that because it made the book even more amazing. I really wish that they would turn this book into a movie, not because of the plot itself. There's not much going on the story, but the visual aspect of this, if it were turned into a movie, would be simply gorgeous. And even though this book is over 300 pages, I read it in less than a day, so I couldn't give it less than 5 out of 5 stars. Next I read The Midnight Palace by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. This is the second book in the Nebula trilogy, and it follows Ben and Shiri, who are twins that have to face the return of an evil threat that they were saved from when they were babies. This was my favorite book in the trilogy. It is dark and filled with tension right from the beginning. It also has Carlos Ruiz Zafón's trademark plot twist in the end of the book, and it unravels the mystery in a way that I'd never expect. His writing is also great as always, and it was a very quick read, so I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. Next I read The Watcher in the Shadows by Carlos Ruiz Zafón, which is the third book in the Nebula trilogy. This follows a family that find themselves threatened by dangerous secrets when they move to a place called Blue Bay. I love how Zafón's writing always has this eerie undertone to it, and how there's always more to the story than it seems. What bothered me a little bit about this book was that because I had already read The Prince of Mist, which is the first book in the trilogy, and The Midnight Palace, I found some elements recognizable in the story, so it ended up being a little bit predictable for me, but it's still worth reading, especially if you haven't read the first two books. This book will be just as surprising as any other book by this author. I ended up giving this 4 out of 5 stars. Next I read Red Queen by Victoria Aveyard. This book really surprised me. I started reading it having super low expectations, and I ended up highly enjoying it, the writing style, the characters. I gave this 4.5 out of 5 stars, but I won't tell you much more about it because I did a full non-spoiler review on this book, so if you want to know what I thought about it with more detail, I'll leave a link to that video in the description bar. Next I read Vacations from Hell by 5 different authors. This is a collection of supernatural short stories that take place during vacation time. What I liked the most about this book was that it was a very quick and entertaining read. Every story is different from each other, they vary from creepy to fun, from vampire to ghosts, and overall they were great reads. I ended up giving this book 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was King Edgar Hotel. I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars, but I won't be saying anything else about it right now. I'll post a video in a few days that will be completely dedicated to explaining what this book is all about, so keep an eye out for that. The next book I read was Shadow Kiss by Richelle Mead. This is the third book in the Vampire Academy series, and I loved it just as much as I did books 1 and 2. This book isn't as action-packed as the other books. It is a lot more focused on Rose's character development, and I really enjoyed that. I think that Rose is an amazing main protagonist, and it was great getting to know more about what's behind her feelings and her actions. Plus the ending was heartbreaking, and just like the other books, it left me really looking forward to the sequel, so I ended up giving this 5 out of 5 stars. The last book I read this month was A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness. There's been a lot of hype surrounding this author on BookTube lately, so I was really looking forward to reading one of his books, and A Monster Calls didn't disappoint me. The writing is very beautiful yet simple, and so is the story. This is a very sad and moving story. It is impossible not to feel all the feels while reading this book. Everyone who read it said that they cried in the end, and I was no different. I think that it is a very touching story and everyone should read it, so I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. So that's it guys, those were all the books that I read this month. I think it was a pretty good reading month. I've been reading a lot of amazing books this year and I hope I can keep that up. Let me know if you've read any of these books and if you agree with what I said about them. Also let me know what was your favorite book of the month. Thanks for watching and I'll see you soon with another video. Bye!